I started this podcast because I'm fascinated by how we get better at bridge, how we reach that next level. I'm talking with expert players about how they got where they are and what they do to continue honing their skills, to less experienced players about what they're doing to improve their game, and to experts in fields outside of bridge, like learning and expertise. If you're looking to level up your game, check out my classes on Learn Bridge Online. Mondays are about the expert thought process, and Thursdays are about declare or play. You can attend the classes live or you can watch the recorded replay. I'm looking forward to leveling up together. I am joined this week by Bill Neumann. Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Adam, and thanks for having me on Leveling Up.
Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
So, even at my advanced age, I'm still full-time employed as the IT business, working with Microsoft Technologies. I consider myself to be a technically qualified architect and systems engineer. I've been doing that for many dozens of years. When I got married, my wife told me I could only have one hobby, so I had to dump a bunch of them. So over the years, I've cycled through different hobbies. I was a long-distance runner, doing 10Ks and marathons for years. Then when my back gave out, I switched over to racing road bicycles with the old guys for about a dozen years. And finally, I got so old that I'd have to spot people too many decades to race. So I started to resurrect my bridge playing hobby from my college days.
So when did you learn bridge?
I learned how to play cards with my dad and my granddad. We played pinochle every weekend when my grandparents would come over to visit. We did that for through my high school years, and my granddad also taught me to play chess when I was about 7. And he and I played every weekend, and even did postal chess back in the day when postcards were still a thing. And when I got to college at RPI up in Troy, New York, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, I learned how to play bridge from my dorm mates during freshman year, but then learned how to play bridge correctly when many of the chess players I knew were also bridge players. And so I quickly realized that my upside for chess was going to be very limited. I just was never going to get that good, whereas bridge had this random element to it where even if you were pretty hopeless, you might do something occasionally. And so I liked that aspect of it and wound up playing bridge with some very fine players. It turned out prior to my becoming a freshman at RPI, Albert and Rosner were there. Marty Bergen, when I was there, was over in Albany State. There was a small group of very competent college bridge players, plus Murray Melton and Simon Cantor were living in Schenectady, and they would go ahead and let us play against them in team matches occasionally. So pretty good place to go ahead and learn how to play adequately.
Great. And then you took some time off, it sounds like, and then came back to it?
Yep, about 8 years or so ago, I had taken a new job up that had me out in New York City for 18 months. And DBO was getting very popular, and I was on New Jersey Transit trains going to and from clients. So playing against the robots became a way to get fresh again. Oddly enough, I actually benefited from not playing for about 40 years because one of my college mates had hypothesized that even if one didn't play bridge regularly, if you read bridge regularly, you would retain your facility in the game. So for 40 some odd years, every day, I read some of my bridge worlds. And so I avoided building up a lot of bad habits, and my bidding judgment just through osmosis is fairly decent. And that's how I got back into playing bridge. Robots early and taking advantage of 40 years of reading bridge worlds.
So for 40 years, you didn't touch a card, but you read the bridge world every day?
Pretty much. Yeah, I might have played 4 or 5 times in 40 years.
Wow. So did you always imagine that you would go back to playing?
Never really thought about it a lot. I just enjoyed the game. I enjoyed reading about all these famous bridge players that eventually I've now gotten a chance to meet. And once again, with the one hobby rule, I finally got to the point where bridge became the one hobby.
That boggles my mind that you could keep up with it that long without playing. I mean, what a game that you can just read about it and still enjoy it for 40 years.
Well, they write quite well at Bridge World.
It's a great magazine. Absolutely. And then how did you hear about the Leveling Up program?
Well, I think I probably picked it up originally from the bulletin, the ACBL bulletin. And then I got intrigued with your challenge, essentially. What is the difference? And it turns out as an architect and systems engineer, one of my major strengths is I'm a great problem solver. So I said, well, this is a kind of a practical, interesting problem. What is the difference? And so I listened to your podcast, and once again, I'm pretty good at assimilating what people are telling you. And they were all dancing around something that I had gone ahead and thought about for quite a bit, but made no progress on, which is if one could get inside the heads of the people that you're trying to teach, you could probably help them get better sooner because you'd understand why they made mistakes as opposed to just making mistakes and correcting it. And then with the advent of AI, I could explore that concept with an AI personality who has access to all the cognitive science textbooks in the world. And we were able to go ahead and put two and two together and realize that an undiscovered area of bridge is all about how your conscious and subconscious minds work. The premise being that you can't play bridge, you can't even do any kind of serious athletics without a high dependence on your subconscious doing things for you. We don't think about it because we think we have one mind, but there's really two going on. The cognitive scientists call the subconscious mind system one. That's the fast, pattern-based, automatic part of your brain that recognizes there's a double squeeze. You don't even have to, you don't try to find it. It just tells you there's a double squeeze there. System two is the deliberate analytical one that tries to figure out what Bob Hyman called what is the situation, right, as opposed to what do I do.
So this is like the Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. I'm actually not quite finished with it, but I've really been enjoying it. It really resonated for me that, you know, you have this kind of intuitive self that produces an answer quickly, but like AI, it hallucinates sometimes. Like it'll have very definitive answers and be very wrong, but it's often very, very right.
Yes.
And then you have this system that you have to kind of turn on and is work.
Yes.
And, you know, it's lazy. It doesn't want to work. And telling it, okay, let's double check the work of system one.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself, especially as a bridge player, to be overly reliant on system one and pretty lazy. And my system one is exceptionally good at bridge, but in a lot of ways I feel like that has held me back because I've relied on it so much and I haven't created the habit of engaging that system two to check the work.
Red Green is trying to attack that problem because I believe it may well be the biggest differentiator between the best players in the world and those a tier or more below. That they've got their subconscious and conscious minds working together very well, and their subconscious mind is fine-tuned to recognize more things faster with more accuracy than most of us. Because they, you know, the best players in the world don't know techniques we don't know. They may practice them more frequently because they see them, but they don't know them intellectually. A very simple way to think about the problem is that people read all kinds of bridge books, but what they're doing is they're really communicating with system two, the slow, deliberate, analytical part. Without reinforcement, a lot of that information never finds its way back into system one where it's accessible on demand. Actually, without demand, just it prompts you. There's another interesting wrinkle in this, which a little bit of a digression. There are two major different ways in which people think. All right, so I'm going to give you a little instant quiz. So if I ask you to visualize a bright red apple in your mind's eye, can you do it?
Sure.
That will tag you as a visualizer, which is what most people use as their dominant way of thinking. There's a smaller percentage of people that come up with nothing. I'm one of them. I can't visualize anything in my mind's eye. I just get a big blank. I can't visualize a red apple or a face. I can describe each of them in exquisite detail, all right, and manipulate them in my head. People with that particular way of thinking have a thinking process called aphantasia, a term I had never heard of until a couple months ago when I was exploring all this red-green. I realized that I was aphantasic, and now it made a lot of sense when people kept talking about things that I could not conceive. I play with a lot of people that are visualizers, and they remember hands as Bob Hammond did, you know, from years and years ago because they have a mental picture of it. I have no mental pictures of any hands I've ever played. Can I recall hands? Absolutely, but no mental pictures.
What percentage of the population has this?
Somewhere between 1% and 5%, but when it comes to playing bridge, it turns out that visualizers are likely to make cognitive mistakes that are different from aphantasics. The most common mistake for visualizers is something called picture lock. You start to play a hand, you start envisioning what the opponent's hands look like, but the data changes from trick to trick. But because the subconscious has got such a lock on that picture, you fail to make the adjustments and realize a different line of play is required.
That happens all the time.
You see that happen all the time?
All the time to me. I had one in Philadelphia. Declarer led up to the 10-4 of clubs in the dummy, and I had the ace king, and then later they played the jack, and I was just sure they had queen jack third of clubs. And my partner signaled and like they pitched, like I knew what was going on, but it was just in my mind. Declare has queen jack third of clubs. And it turned out my partner had queen third of clubs. And that was our last trick. And they made the contract. Drove
Yep.
me crazy, right? Why did this get stuck in my mind? Like I made
Yep.
an assumption. It was not an unreasonable assumption, but then I wasn't able to overcome it.
Right. Yeah, that's a classic picture lock phenomena. The other one is that you recognize a theme in the hand and you jump on it because you can visualize it with such excruciating detail that it locks in and you miss a slightly better line. You lock into a familiar theme and you miss one that's disguised. And so knowing that your subconscious sometimes does bad things to you, like it misses something that it should get, or alternatively surfaces something that is really incorrect, but before you realize it, you've done what it told you to do. And that probably happens again and again with people that you teach, right? That they keep making the same kinds of mistakes over and over again. Well, why is that? Because system one is sending the message and system two never gets a chance to go ahead and do anything about it, or at least they're not programming themselves to recognize that there's something I need to go ahead and take a look at what system one is telling me. They just trust it because most of the time it's correct. And so red green is all about trying to go ahead and improve that situation so you make fewer mistakes of that type. And really all it is, it's about getting to the point where you take pauses at the appropriate points in time and let system two, the slow one, go ahead and take a look at what system one is telling you, or take a pause and kind of interrogate system one, kind of kickstart it to take a closer look at what's going on. So instead of just jumping on the first theme that it sees, oh, is there anything else I should be thinking about? Gee, I recognize the diamond situation here, but oh yeah, maybe there's a little loser and loser play here.
So tell us what red green is, how you came up with it, what the basics are.
The basics are that hands fall into three color categories. Green says it's a routine hand, trust your instincts. And it's useful to go ahead and classify hands as green because the vast majority of them are going to be that way. So don't waste mental effort trying to watch spot cards and count suits and reconstruct hands on hands that are generally green.
This is like knock out two aces and claim 11 tricks, that kind of
Exactly.
hand.
Yeah, exactly. Or theme. It can be even a relatively complex hand, but you know the theme, and there's nothing to be watched unless suits break 5-0 or something like that, in which case you'll re-examine your green categorization. But the cool part about it is one of the techniques we'll be using to instantiate red-green into your playing pattern is using it as a vocabulary for postmortems. Postmortems that you do by yourself or you do with someone else. It doesn't make any difference. The act of using red-green in a postmortem will automatically start making you more sensitive to taking the pauses at the right points in time. I've identified two flavors of yellow, all right? Neither of them stay around for the whole hand. The first one is, I sense this is a difficult hand, but I'm not quite sure what theme might be in play yet. But I now know I need to go ahead and be extra careful on every trick until I can sort out what I need to go do. Yellow 2 is a little bit different in that it's one of these strange hands, typically like a one-note trump hand, where you realize that the right play is to do nothing. It's to not commit to any particular line of play, but to let the opponents dictate how the hand's going to be played out. From a chess standpoint, it's basically not trying to make things happen, but just strengthen your position. So yellow 2 says, this isn't the time to do something, but I'm going to have to do stuff at some point in time, but I'm now on high alert.
So the yellow one is kind of like my spidey sense is tingling here.
Yes. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I know I now have to be careful and I have to be attentive. So that's different from green, where I can save my brain power for something else. Then I have three flavors of red. Red A says, I see exactly what the problem is, all right, but I'm not sure what the solution is yet. So once again, you're on high alert, but I now know exactly what the problem is. I have to avoid losing two tricks or 5 tricks in a 3-note trump contract, but it's not clear what technique I should be using. So I have to go ahead and think that through. Red B says there's one clear theme that I need to go ahead and execute, but it has to be done precisely. So I have to work out the exact line of play to execute this theme properly.
I know what the play is. It's just going to be complicated and I need to focus.
I need to focus on it and watch the spot cards and be very attentive. And when you see that something is going to be something like red B, that also kind of warns you that you should be watching spot cards early in the hand, because you may need to go ahead and figure out suit distributions, or where high cards are in order to go ahead and execute that precise plan correctly. The most challenging ones are red C, where you've got competing themes or multiple themes that you have to execute. Those are the ones that we most easily miss, particularly for visualizers, because you lock onto a thing and it now obscures seeing the next hurdle or alternative hurdles. Those are the toughest ones.
I feel like one of my problems is looking at a hand and being like, oh, this is easy, this is green, and I missed something.
Yep.
Right? And this happens to my students all the time, right? There's a blockage that they don't see.
Yep.
Or there's an entry issue, or if the trumps are 4-1, there's going to be this thing. And I feel like the fact that you have a green designation is scary to me because people are going to overuse it. Have you found that?
That's actually the learning opportunity. So if you declared that a hand was green and it turned out it really wasn't, when you post-mortem the hand, you're now going to have an aha moment saying, oh, shoot, I didn't go ahead and recognize that. And then comes the good part, which is what was the trigger that you should have seen that would have allowed you to go ahead and execute that play. Now they start thinking about triggers, and eventually triggers will work into my flashcards, because whenever you're trying to introduce something new, a way to try to go ahead and embed it into system 1 versus being stuck up in system 2 where it might not do you any good is to put together some flashcards. If it's a convention, you'd call it an agreement card. What is the new agreement I'm going to try to remember? And then a trigger card that says, well, under what conditions should I go ahead and pick up on it? And then finally a quiz card, which has an example hand, a realistic example to help you recall and apply it without a prompt. And so you can periodically look at that and pick it up. That was a good way of trying to go ahead and make a transition from something that's only being absorbed by the conscious mind and start to go ahead and embed it into the subconscious.
So making a decision, is that the important step there to get it from system 2 to system 1?
That's actually what happens. Think about what happens when people begin to start playing bridge for the first time. Everything is in system 2. How to count high card points, how to decide if something's an opening. And over a period of time, it suddenly goes from being excruciatingly slow and hard to do and suddenly being automatic. Same thing for counting out hands and so forth. Initially, it's a painful, slow, mental exercise, but because you have to do it repeatedly, eventually it becomes nearly automatic because it's in your subconscious. So that's what's actually going on. It just turns out some people have done it better and faster through sheer repetition, but you don't have to do it only through sheer repetition, which is all the bridge community knows about today. You can actually target going after new agreements or unusual positions by taking advantage of all the collateral material that people have built up over the decades. My favorite is test your play hands. They are a wonderful place to work on being able to say, what is the situation? And recognizing what's the theme.
Can you do that with counting and stuff too? Like, can you speed up that process of counting out hands, learning to count trumps, or is that just need the repetition?
That probably you need the repetition for that. Visualizers find that a bit easier than aphantasics. My most common mistakes is getting lost in keeping track of multiple suits, multiple spot cards, over multiple tricks late in the hand. I have a little trick I use, which I'll pass on for whatever it might be worth, that when I'm trying to go ahead and keep track of just the number of cards, that have been played in each suit, because the honor cards are the one I care about, I can watch for those, but I need to keep the count. I will actually use a 3-digit numeric. So 2, 1, 4, 2 spades, 1 heart, 4 clubs have been played. And then after every trick, I'll increment the 3-digit number. Usually one suit doesn't count. You only usually have 3 suits to keep track of, and I will just increment the 3-digit number. And that way it's much easier. I can remember the 3-digit number and increment the right suits by 1, the hundreds, the tens, or units. By trying to remember X number of spades, X number of hearts, X number of diamonds, that's very hard for me. Same thing for spot cards. One of my flaws is that I will look right through spot cards that people are playing because they're not meaningful at this point in time. I don't have a place to anchor it. But I have to do when I want to watch a spot card, or I know I will go ahead and anchor it to the theme I'm trying to execute, and then I will remember it because I can retrieve it. Remember things by association, not by direct retrieval.
Yeah, the number of times that like my right-hand opponent has shown out, and I register that they have shown out, and then 2 tricks later, all right, but what card did they pitch? And it's gone.
Right. If I never really look at it, I was talking to Peter Boyd about things like this a number of months ago, and he said what he does is that he sub-vocalizes the spot cards when they're played as a technique. Because if I sub-vocalize it, that meant I had to see it. And I also kind of sub-vocalize, audibly said it. Much better chance that 4 tricks later, I can recall what happened. If you never see it, you can't remember it.
All right, so how does one use this red-green system practically to improve their game?
What appears to happen is if you use it often enough against like test your play hands or in postmortems, what happens is that you find yourself automatically being much more conscious of taking pauses at the right point in time and searching for, is this just yellow and I don't know what to do yet? Is it just a single theme? Are there any other themes? And you just wind up incrementally becoming more aware of what's going on because you realize I need to go ahead and leverage my subconscious mind on occasions. You also start becoming a little bit more aware when the subconscious is trying to trip you up. I don't have that particular problem because I didn't build up a lot of bad habits when I wasn't playing face to face. But I see any number of advancing players who built up a lot of bad habits in order to do well against peers at the time. And then when they start playing against stronger players, they get killed because those same habits surface and the better players just take advantage of them. What should happen with red-green is they become more aware of these priority interrupts from their subconscious and say, well, wait a minute, before I go do this, I need to think that through. And eventually, after 2 or 3 corrections, the subconscious now starts building up a better habit, hopefully. You want to replace it with some other habit, a good habit, as opposed to a bad one. Bad habits die hard. They're terribly persistent. I remember one of your podcasts where they basically said that they started using transfer responses over a takeout double, and it took them a whole year before it became instinctive to do that. And up till then, they kept messing up every now and again. Perfect example of what happens with your subconscious taking over the bridge play on you without you really appreciating it.
So you're not recommending using this while you're playing, at least at first, right?
I could not do it. And I tried really hard. I sat here playing against the robots I actually bought some red, green, and yellow soccer penalty cards. And I had them in front of me. But trying to think about a bridge hand and put something else in my way just wasn't working. But now that I've gone ahead and, I've got years and years worth of test your plays. I'll pick up a test your play. I'll flip to the test your play hands. And I'll say, okay, what's the theme? And after doing that a number of times, I now find that when I'm playing hands, I do the Bob Hammond thing. What's the situation? All right. And I'm less likely to go ahead and just bludgeon, blast past something.
How is doing a test your play sort of problem different from playing a hand against a robot?
The more advanced you are, the more green hands you're going to encounter. So that means your hit to miss ratio is pretty low when you're playing random hands against the robots or even playing normal face-to-face bridge. Your test your play hands, every one of them is going to be what I call red B or red C, either a single theme that's really complicated or multiple themes and you have to wend your way through them and pick the right ones. The sheer act of going through those will make you better. Basically, you're improving your repertoire or your suite of triggers that your subconscious mind will surface when you're playing a hand. And so when you take the time to go ahead and say, what's the situation? Your subconscious will look for the triggers. What are the things I need to look for all the different kinds of techniques that you've experienced going through the test your play hands? Many of them in test your play are actually about the sequence in which you execute tricks.
So I would think that a big part of this is identifying when a hand is red, or more importantly, identifying that it's not green. So
Right.
I would think if you're just looking at test your play problems, you're not working on that because they're all red, right? Like this is the problem with Bridgemaster, is you're
Right.
always looking for the problem.
Usually the hardest thing to do is to be able to recognize what themes are in play. What is the situation? And if it turns out you're too casual about declaring something green and you get burned by it, as long as you're doing a post-mortem, you'll get suitably punished, and that will reinforce not making that same damn mistake again. And I now realize retrospectively that all the people you interviewed, so many of them went ahead and emphasized how fussy they are about always doing post-mortems. Well, what's going on is that they intrinsically have appreciated the fact that one of the ways in which I can improve my integration between my conscious mind, my subconscious mind, and triggers is to go through postmortems to see what I might have missed. What trigger was there that what theme was there that I didn't see that I now see looking at the hand records, and that just the action that I didn't see it is enough of a trigger to go ahead and say, well, I'm not going to let that happen again if I ever see that particular theme. You do that often enough, regularly enough, it's going to improve. So that's just another way that bridge players have figured out how to do a better job of training their subconscious. I mean, ultimately, it's a very simple thing. Everything starts out in the conscious mind. You read about it, you know about it, and then you have to do something to go ahead and embed it into your subconscious because it holds your life experiences. Just think about how you drive a car, all right? You don't think about how hard to press the accelerator, how far to turn the steering wheel for a corner. It's all automatic, all right? You never mess up because you do it regularly and you've got plenty of practice on it. Same thing in bridge. You don't mess up easy hands anymore at all, but you still sometimes miss a complex hand We think of it sometimes it's because of a lack of attention, I lost focus, got distracted. But in many cases, you were depending on your subconscious to tell you there was something to go do, and the message didn't come through before you made the play or the bid.
When I'm at the table, should I be identifying a hand as green, yellow, red?
You can do that, or you can rely on the fact that I've been training my brain to go ahead and do the right thing. And it will just intrinsically, nothing here. I've taken a good look. So I'm not going to pay an overly large amount of attention to the hand unless something dramatic occurs. Somebody shows out on the first round of trump. Well, now the hand is something other than green. I better be careful. But sometimes you realize up front, it's probably green, but I do need to use a little bit of care just in case you play your high cards in the right order so you can take the finesse in the event of a 4-1 break. It's still most of us, we declare it as green. It doesn't require a lot of conscious thought. You just automatically do that. Same thing with unblocking spot cards. You don't block suits anymore. Of course, we all did when we were younger, earlier in our careers. But after we got burned a few times, we said, I'm not going to let that happen again. And so you now actually subconsciously scan your suit combinations as declare and dummy to look for a blocking situation and make sure you do something about it. Teaching people, now that you know what's going on, you can now dwell on the fact that not only do I have to explain things to people and have them intellectually understand it, I have to find some way to help them embed that into their subconscious so that they can actually use what they've learned as opposed to it just being, you're right. There was a double squeeze there. I missed that one. I'll try to do better next time. Because most people, without having heard this podcast, are never going to realize that duality being of two minds, that these two have to work together. And when they don't, bad things tend to happen.
So as a teacher, right, I'm teaching someone and they mess up drury, let's say. And I point out, this drury, 2 clubs is a raise, like you missed it again. What do I do to get that into system 1? How do I help them recognize it better next time?
Well, it's the fact that you're a passed hand and partner open to major. All right, that's the trigger. So every time you see partner open to major, you're a passed hand, you want the trigger to hit, is this a hand where I should be using drury? As opposed to not having a trigger and simply saying, gee, I've got ace, king, queen, 5 of clubs, and I'm a passed hand, I'll bid 2 clubs. It's going ahead and making those triggers explicit, all right, because then if they miss it, well, did you not recognize that the trigger was there? You were passed hand with a major suit opening. Well, yeah, because that's a lot easier to remember. It's not an abstract thing about remembering the Drury convention. It's remembering the trigger, passed hand, major suit opening.
I see the 2 clubs, and I feel like in my mind, the first thing is, that's a 2/1 bid. And then I see the pass, and then I'm like, it's Drury. I feel like there is that 2-step process.
I actually do things a little bit differently because I'm lazy and like to make good use of whatever time I have. If I am a passed hand, and the auction is starting to move from me to LHO and then eventually to partner, I'm already looking at my hand and saying, well, how might I respond to different opening bids? Because I can rip through that, in fractions of a second. And that's when I would go ahead and say, I've got a nice jury hand, should partner open 1 heart. And then when it goes pass, 1 heart, pass, my jury bid's already there. I always try to make good use of the time before I have to bid to consider the different bids I might make. That comes in handy in other ways as well. I'm a big fan of what I call auction management. I don't go ahead and make bids on complex competitive auctions just because I have the values to make the bid. I first think through, where do I want this auction to end? Well, I want it to end in only 4 spades, with us being declare ideally. I don't want them taking a save and 5 of a minor or 5 hearts. Well, what bid can I make now to go ahead and preclude them having a better shot at saving on me? And so sometimes I'll make a very peculiar bid with the intent of making it more challenging for the opponents to find what I believe will be their winning bid. Some of my teammates will just simply go ahead and bid what their hand is worth and then be confronted by a problem that they could have anticipated up front. No, I like to give my opponents problems. I don't try to give myself problems. But same thing on opening bids. You're going to be 3rd or 4th to speak and you've got a long suit with a reasonable number of high card points. The vulnerability is favorable. You start thinking about, if I want pass, would I open 2 hearts or 3 hearts? If they open, do I want to make a jump over call? Partner opens, what might I do? And that way your bidding tempo is much more ethical because you're bidding in tempo, not taking extended pauses to work out something for the first time when you finally are confronted with it.
So if I'm at the table and I realize, this is not an easy hand, this is a red hand.
Yep.
Is there value in categorizing it A, B, and C in my mind at the table? Or is it just enough to be like, engage system 2?
But you actually transition through, like if you start out with, clearly there's some complex theme here. So it starts out being essentially, if you're being scientific about it, it starts out as red A. But red A is not a permanent place to be. You've got to transition to make it either red B or red C. It's either one theme or multiple themes. Same with yellow. You never stay in yellow. A yellow that says it's something to do, but I haven't got a clue what it is yet, that will eventually transition into some flavor of red. If it starts out yellow 2, says there's going to be something to do, but I don't know what it is quite yet. I'm going to play a few tricks and see what goes on. It'll also transition to another color.
It could become green, right? Like they just like set up dummy suits. I was like, okay, well, this became really easy.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't waste a lot of effort. Once you realize what the theme is, you can then execute comfortably, pay attention to what's going on, and then play off of what the opponents have done for you or to you. I find more often than not the opponents do things for you if you give them half a chance. I'm a big fan of if you can give the opponents multiple decisions to make, you've increased the odds that one of them won't be correct.
Absolutely. So do you say this is a red B hand to yourself as you're declaring?
It's probably subconscious at this point that I recognize that, there's something tricky here. I need to think this through. And then I spend my time doing my normal thing. So you're really not doing anything different. You're just trying to recognize that there's now something to do that you're always capable of doing, but you might have missed otherwise. It's getting those pauses in there, being able to recognize when you need to take your time. And the biggest trap is thinking that there's nothing to go do, being oblivious to what the opponents are playing, and then realize 5 tricks later that, oh shoot, I really should have been paying attention to the nature of the spot cards that the opponents were playing, because now I need to go ahead and determine how suits are breaking and I don't have the data anymore. But that means you basically misclassified the hand as green when it was really going to turn out to be some sort of red hand, and now you're in trouble.
One of the things that has really made an impact on me kibitzing really good players is when they have a card to play that seems like totally obvious to me. This is green, right? Of course you're playing the Jack of Clubs. And they'll stop and think. And I was like, the Jack of Clubs would have been on the table 10 seconds ago. Like,
right.
What is Bobby Levin thinking about? And 9 times out of 10, they end up playing the Jack of Clubs.
Mm-hmm.
But that other time, they figure out that the Jack of Clubs was wrong. That discipline to look beyond the green and just assume it's not green.
Well, I suspect what's happening is their subconscious is tickling them, saying that there may be more to this hand than meets the eye.
Right.
Once that happens, they're now going to dig. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and figure out, is there really nothing here, or is there potentially something?
So you think when I looked at the position and said, this is green, Jack of Clubs is obvious, and Bobby Levin was in the position and some spidey sense was going off and said, look more deeply, it's just his subconscious being more experienced than mine and better trained and seeing something that mine didn't?
Yeah, obviously his subconscious saw something that triggered, you should probably think about this before you play the next card. Probably his conscious mind said, I'm not seeing anything here right now, but he's come across that situation often enough to say, okay, I trust my subconscious triggers that it saw something. I need to at least figure out what it saw and then decide whether or not I should act on, that there's something to act on. What you'd love to do is post-mortem that hand and that play with Bobby to say, you took a lot of time right there. Can you tell me what trigger caused you to start thinking and what you were actually thinking through? And your mind would probably go tilt-a-whirl when he gave you the explanation. You say, oh my God, he was worried about this not too likely thing, but could be very important, and that he could probably work out whether that was present or not if he just thought about it long enough. The beauty of being able to have almost unlimited time in major team games. That's probably another reason why the best players in the world are better than the rest of us, that they've had more sessions where they've had unlimited time to go ahead and reconcile subconscious triggers with conscious play.
So have you tried this red-green method with players of different levels, and what has the experience there been?
As you drop down in levels, people will be missing things because they're just not familiar with the technique. Just there's no trigger for it. And even if they were triggered, they wouldn't know how to go ahead and do the execution of it. So you're going to find that if you do postmortems with them, you're going to be cluttered with some basic things in addition to the red-green ones. But I can't see any harm in using the red-green vocabulary. One of my fellow bridge players here in Columbia, Maryland, where I live, is a lot of teaching. He was saying that one of the things he likes about red-green is that it's discussing errors becomes neutral. There's no accusations involved, because you're basically saying, this is what happened. What thought process were you going through at the time, all right, that led you to this versus the thing that you should have done? And you wind up discussing what the trigger should have been to alert you to the right play, as opposed to being critical of the wrong play. You're basically trying to accelerate the normal learning process, shorten it down a bit, and be more directive in what you're doing.
Yeah, I love this idea that learning at bridge is about training your subconscious.
Yes.
And thinking about it in those terms, it takes a lot of the recrimination out of it. And
Absolutely.
you're not stupid. You just need to train your subconscious more.
Exactly.
And you need to see where it went wrong, how you can identify that in the future. Yeah, I love that.
Part of me believes that red-green is really the next advancement in bridge teaching, that you do everything you're currently doing, but the last chapter is going to be acquainting people with red-green and using that vocabulary in postmortems to go ahead and accelerate their development over time, move things from system 2, which they understand, into system 1 where it's put into practice. And so, n number of years from now, I would expect that red-green or something similar, with a different name, hopefully it'll say red-green, will find its way into the standard bridge teaching, that once people get to a certain point, you now make them aware of the fact that they've got to deal with both their conscious and their subconscious minds. Until system 1 picks up what you just learned, you're going to be very inefficient. Just think how much time it would take us, any of us, to go ahead and play a bridge hand in a tournament if you could only use your system 2 mind and you had to think through everything consciously. It would be horrible. Some people, you can tell, they're very efficient in how they think through things, whether they get it right or wrong. They are efficient. Others much more methodical. There's a range which is perfectly fine, but you'll find outliers occasionally where red-green might help you sort out what's going on.
You were saying that reading is a system 2 endeavor and that getting that into system 1 doesn't happen automatically. So I love reading bridge books. How do I use that as training for my subconscious?
Defense is always the hardest thing for all of us to go do. And I've got a number of bridge books with defensive problems in them. And when I try to look at things, I'm trying to figure out what's going to allow me to go ahead and use what I've just learned in practice. And so I look for what are the triggers. I consider myself to be one of the best opening leaders of anybody I've ever played with. But I made a hobby of sorts of learning how to lead well, because you're an opening lead a quarter of the time. So I've made a specialty out of getting good at opening leads, primarily by working through the opening leads against no trump, opening leads against suit contracts books. There is a great opportunity to kind of do the red-green transition from intellectual understanding to instinctive. What you do is you go to the end of the chapter, for each chapter, take the quiz first and look to see how often you don't find the first or second best opening lead, and take note of that. Then go read the chapter, and if you're an aphantagic and can forget the previous hands, you take the quiz again and see how much better you got. If you have a pretty good memory but not a perfect one, take the quiz up front, read the chapter, and then after a while, once you've forgotten the hands, go back and take the quiz. The idea is to never get more than 1 or 2 hands where you're not getting either the best lead or the second best lead. Any ones you're getting third or fourth, you didn't learn what you needed to learn about that particular combination.
Well, Bill, thank you. I love what you're doing. This is a really novel way of thinking about this. I need to do a lot more thinking about it, and I'm going to do some postmortem thinking with this framework and see if I can train my system 1 even a little better.
Yeah, keep me posted on how well it either works or does not. Once again, the clue to that was from all your podcasts, because almost all the great bridge players that you interviewed all went ahead and pointed out how they're just absolutely focused on making sure they do the postmortems, because even they don't play enough hands to learn everything they want to learn from playing. They need to do the postmortems to go ahead and pick up the things they miss.
Well, it makes me so happy when the Leveling Up Project and the podcast can spur other people to do really cool things. So I'm so glad about that. I'm so glad you reached out, and I think everyone's going to really enjoy this.
Yeah, you were my inspiration, because it had been percolating around in the back of my mind, but then I decided to treat it as an intellectual problem and say, I'm going to figure out something that's been stumping Adam for a bit and all the people he's been interviewing.
Amazing. I love it. All right. Well, everyone, check out Bill's Substack. Thank you, Bill.
Sure.